have it, folks, conclusive proof that Spider-Man was responsible for the brutal murder of Mysterio.
Welcome back, everyone. This is my full Venom Let There Be Carnage movie breakdown, Easter eggs for the entire movie. Hopefully you've had a chance to see it. There's a bunch of Easter eggs and references. Obviously, the post-credit scene is a really huge deal. Everything's sort of connecting it to the larger Marvel universe. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, so if you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. It is a good time to be a big Spider-Man fan because of Spider-Man No Way Home coming out right after this. We also have the Morbius movie coming and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 2 also coming out next year. Careful for spoilers for the movie if you have not seen it yet. I know there's like a weird release thing going on with some countries not getting the movie for a little while, so just blanket spoiler warning. But the movie title, Let There Be Carnage, and the plot are loosely based on Spider-Man Maximum Carnage, combined with Carnage's origin story from the comics and Cletus Cassidy's origin story. And just based on the timeline of the post-credit scene with him being teleported to the main MCU Earth and watching the scene of J. Jonah Jameson and Tom Holland's Spider-Man, it seems like most of this movie takes place just a little while before the events of Spider-Man No Way Home. And even though the biggest Easter eggs in the post-credit scene are obviously meant to cross Venom over with Tom Holland's Spider-Man inside the MCU, like bringing Venom into the MCU, there were a lot of Tobey Maguire Spider-Man Easter eggs during this, and Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man Easter eggs. The opening scene at St. Estes Orphanage is a slight change to Cletus Cassidy's origins from the comics, and the whole story about him pushing his grandmother down the stairs, electrocuting his mother, killing his father, that's all accurate to the comic book story. Later, he sort of references that, yelling at Eddie Brock, "You didn't tell everyone how I was abused, and that's the reason why I killed my family." The one major change that they made was giving him more of a backstory with his girlfriend Shriek, who is from the Maximum Carnage storyline, but during that storyline, they only formed a relationship after they had both been sent to Ravencroft. So even though Ravencroft is a big part of the movie, in the comics, Cletus meets Shriek for the first time when they're at Ravencroft together as adults. Most of their early relationship backstory is just to set up the big twist with the wedding, the quote-unquote Game of Thrones Red Wedding as they call it later in the movie. I was surprised to hear them make that Game of Thrones reference. Shriek is canonically a mutant in the movie. They changed her powers just a little bit, they kind of depowered her. She does have that sonic scream ability that you see during the movie, but she can also fly, and she has the ability to see into people's minds and bring out their inner darkness. I know there are all kinds of questions about what happened at the end of the movie between her and Patrick Mulligan after his fight with her, because you see his eyes glowing blue like Shriek's eyes did during the movie. In the comics, Patrick Mulligan becomes the host of Toxin, the symbiote offspring of Carnage, so I'll explain what happened to him when we get to that part of the movie. The whole intro scene here is also meant to explain Patrick Mulligan's history with Shriek and how she got sent to Ravencroft. They had already planned to send her to Ravencroft when she was younger, and Patrick Mulligan is just one of the police guarding her escort. She winds up damaging his hearing trying to escape. He shoots her, thinking that he killed her this whole time, but because they're experimenting on mutants in this version of the Ravencroft Institute in the Venom movie, they erase all records of her existence, so Patrick Mulligan just thinks that she's dead this whole time. Ravencroft is a big deal. It was featured heavily during Amazing Spider-Man 2 in the Andrew Garfield movies. It was the facility where they were keeping Harry Osborn's Green Goblin, and in the comics, it's also a really big deal. It's used as a mental asylum sort of catch-all / experiment lab for insane people with superpowers. So like I said, during the Maximum Carnage storyline, Carnage had been sent there along with Shriek, but then they jumped to present day in Ravencroft just to show you what's been happening with Shriek this whole time. And even though you don't see them experimenting on her, that's kind of what's going on with the other inmates. They imply that this is a place where they experiment on mutants, but then Cletus Cassidy engineers this plan to communicate with Shriek, just believing somehow that she's still alive out there somewhere. Cletus then tries to turn this into a bigger thing, manipulating Eddie Brock into writing more messages for him into the headlines in exchange for information about where to find the rest of the bodies that he never copped to. The way they explain Patrick Mulligan in present day is that he has this beef with Eddie because Eddie's been a reporter for a long time. He had fallen from grace before the events of the first Venom movie. Like when that movie is taking place, he winds up messing up his whole career, his relationship with Anne Wang. So it's implied that he has history with Patrick Mulligan as a reporter. He probably threw him under the bus a couple times during previous cases, and that's why Mulligan hates him so much. The movie version of Eddie is kind of a dirtbag, just like comic book Eddie Brock. Later, Eddie also winds up giving Mulligan the finger, just making their relationship even more contentious when the symbiote memorizes all of Cletus's wall drawings in his cell the first time he visits him and uses them to decode the location of the bodies so that Eddie no longer needs to publish Cletus messages. pissing off both Cletus Cassidy and Mulligan because he'd agreed to share any evidence that he got with Mulligan, and he just winds up finding the bodies and taking credit for it, which the symbiote also gets pissed off about later too. Wait a minute, I was the one that decoded all those messages. I did the detective work. Again, like I said, Eddie kind of acts like a dirtbag for at least the first big part of the movie. But because they find all of Cletus's body so quickly, the authorities reinstate the death penalty in California just for Cassidy, and he's set to be executed shortly thereafter. While this is all playing out through this big montage, the Venom symbiote also has it out with Eddie over him not letting him eat real human brains. The way they explain it, the symbiotes need this special chemical that brains excrete, and they can only get it in its purest source from human brains. So he's reduced the symbiote to eating chicken brains, which don't provide the level of nutrition that it actually needs to survive. They also play this up for a couple of jokes too, because the symbiote has been keeping a couple of live chickens as pets named Sonny and Cher. And if you don't know real world history, Sonny and Cher wound up having this very famous split divorce, which sort of foreshadows the split that Venom and Eddie have later in the movie. But because Eddie takes credit for finding the bodies, his career gets back on track, and he starts publishing more recent work in the Daily Bugle, obviously big Spider-Man Easter egg, but you'll notice the logo from this Daily Bugle is the logo from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. So cool Spider-Man Easter egg, but also kind of meant to foreshadow the post-credit scene with MCU, J. Jonah Jameson, and his version of the Daily Bugle. When he's sentenced to die, Cletus winds up writing another handwritten note inviting Eddie to his execution, just to goad him there so he can try to stick it to him one last time. He makes all these references to superheroes and people rescuing other people and origin stories as he smashes a spider that crawls up on the table, another big Spider-Man Easter egg. He's actually using his own blood in this pen to write the note. That's why the ink is red. It's also meant to be foreshadowing for him getting the Carnage symbiote and it being a red one. The way they changed the Carnage origin story from the comics, there's one real major change. Cletus winds up goading the symbiote into lashing out at it literally, and then, while they're fighting, bites Eddie, ingesting some of his symbiote-infused blood, and that's how they get the Carnage symbiote. I guess you could also look at this as a funny wink at a reverse Spider-Man character origin story. Like Spider-Man got bitten by a radioactive spider and gets all of his powers, but in this situation, you have Cletus Cassidy biting a Spider-Man character, like a person biting a Spider-Man character and getting their powers that way. If you remember Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, there was also a funny joke about the Peter Porker character during that. He was a regular spider who bit a radioactive pig and became Spider-Ham that way. Later in the movie, Carnage calls Venom Dad, so there's a little hand-waving as to how symbiote reproduction works. They reproduce asexually, but it's their way of adapting the comic book origin story. In that version, Eddie was cellmates with Cletus, and the Venom symbiote busted Eddie out of prison, while doing so reproduced, and the offspring just bonded with the nearest person, who happened to be Cletus Cassidy. Usually with each new generation of symbiote, the offspring become more powerful. That's why Toxin, the offspring of Carnage, is supposed to be even more powerful than Carnage. Later during the final battle, they also clarify some of the symbiote power scaling, where you see Carnage, quote-unquote, reload, like he literally says, time to reload, and eats another person, allowing himself to become even more powerful, even larger. I know this also kind of raises the question, if Venom winds up eating Carnage and Cletus at the end of the movie, does that give him a huge power upgrade? And the answer is yes, at least a temporary big power boost. I did not catch who did the voice of Carnage. It's actually Tom Hardy who does the voice of the Venom symbiote voice. They just process it a whole bunch, but the Carnage voice did not sound like Woody Harrelson at all. One of the other weird changes to the Carnage symbiote abilities, most of them are the comic book abilities, just forming hard-edge weapons and projectiles. But somehow the Carnage symbiote knows how to hack computers. I don't know exactly what's going on with that. Maybe it got it through its hive knowledge in connection to the Venom symbiote, because the Venom symbiote has been using computers through Eddie for a long time now. But apparently the symbiotes are now full-blown computer hackers. Carnage winds up striking a deal with Cletus to help break Shriek out of Ravencroft in exchange for Cletus helping it kill the Venom symbiote, claiming that that will make them more powerful. This isn't a really huge thing in the comics. The Carnage symbiote usually does want to kill its father, Venom, and its offspring, Toxin, but only because they're threats, not for any other weird reason. I think in the movie, there's this whole idea that Carnage would truly become free and also get the added power boost that comes from consuming another symbiote. Like, there's this big theme about freedom to live your life on your own terms, with Eddie and Venom having to constantly hide themselves for fear of being arrested. They explain the FBI is still investigating what happened during the events of the first Venom movie with the Life Foundation and all the missing bodies around Eddie's apartment. So Mulligan makes the connection to Eddie Brock being around all these crime scenes and thinks that he has something to do with it, and that's why they want to arrest him later. And obviously, after the events of the big final battle, it only helps reinforce that idea, with Mulligan watching this all play out, learning about the symbiotes for real. So if Eddie Brock ever comes back to his original universe, he'd still be a wanted criminal. So around the time Cletus becomes Carnage, Eddie and Venom have their breakup, so to speak. They have a bit of a side quest where the symbiote bonds with a whole bunch of other people, random hosts, and goes to this underground club ranting about his terrible relationship with Eddie, but ultimately realizing that he needs him, crawling back to Mrs. Chen. Several times during their fights, the Venom symbiote also calls itself the Lethal Protector from the Venom comic book story. The Lethal Protector storyline was also the basis of the plot of the first movie. The whole thing with Mrs. Chen and her store that carries over from the ending of the first movie is that now they explain she knows all about Venom and struck a deal with Eddie for their protection. In exchange, she supplies them with a steady supply of chocolate that's laced with the same chemical found in human brains that the symbiote needs to survive. So later when the symbiote almost dies from malnourishment in all the rando bodies, Mrs. Chen becomes its temporary host until they can get it to bond with Eddie again. They mostly play it for laughs and to set up that whole Anne Wang Lady Venom twist. The whole Lady Venom scene during the movie is very similar to the events of the first movie, where she winds up bonding with the symbiote to save Eddie Brock, this time saving him from the police station. There's also this funny moment after the symbiote goes back to Eddie where she's like, let's never do that again, except maybe let's do that again because that was really fun. So I think that's the idea that when they do Venom 3 and they bring Anne Wang back, they'll also do more Lady Venom during that film. You also notice inside Mrs. Chen's store, there's a big Stan Lee cameo scene Easter egg with a comic book with his face on the cover that reads, The Amazing Career of Stan Lee, which is just a reference to the Spider-Man comics, and more foreshadowing for the big Spider-Man twist in the post-credit scene. Carnage rescuing Shriek from Ravencroft and breaking out is meant to be a version of the story from Maximum Carnage. They wind up going back to St. Estes to burn it down and then get married at a nearby church cathedral. Also using the wedding as a way of getting rid of the rest of their loose ends, Shriek getting revenge on Mulligan for trying to kill her, Cletus making good on his end of the bargain with Carnage, helping him kill Venom. And this is where they make their big Game of Thrones reference, calling it a red wedding. It's very on-the-nose kind of reference, the way they play it. Carnage is also a red symbiote, so I think they were trying to make that connection too. Tell Cletus the Lannisters send their regards. So they wind up capturing Anne Wang and Mulligan separately and then presenting them to each other as wedding gifts at the ceremony, also forming a priest to perform the ceremony. The big church battle with the bell is also meant to be a reference back to the original Venom origin story from the comics, wherein Peter Parker's Spider-Man goes to a church using the bells to get rid of the symbiote, and it bonds with Eddie Brock for the first time. They did this during a version of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 3 movie. There's also a really cool connection to that version of Venom in the post-credit scene with the multiverse hive mind that the symbiotes have, so I'll talk about that in a second too. During their fight, Carnage literally says the phrase, "Let there be carnage." The other big change here during the final boss fight to the Carnage character is the way he and Cletus are bonded. It's not quite the same as comic book Carnage. In the movie, they go the opposite direction with that, with Carnage hating Cletus's now wife, Shriek, because of her sonic powers affecting it. So the Carnage symbiote keeps trying to kill Shriek, Cletus fighting it from inside their bond, trying to stop it. Eddie finally uses the church bells and Shriek to separate Carnage from Cletus and then eat the Carnage symbiote, after which Venom eats Cletus. Right before this happens, though, Shriek seemingly kills Mulligan, and it seems like he comes back to life the way they play it. The same way that Cletus briefly died, like his heart stopped until the Carnage symbiote emerged from his body and saved him. But when Mulligan comes back to consciousness, his eyes are glowing blue and he's screaming about monsters. So I know there are all kinds of questions about this, like did Carnage leave a piece of itself behind to bond with him and become Toxin from the comics? What I think they're trying to imply here is that Shriek somehow, through her powers, activated a mutation in Mulligan, and that's the reason why his eyes were glowing the same color as Shriek's eyes during the movie, and they'll just address it in future sequels or spin-offs. Him yelling about monsters, I think, is meant to provide some connection to the Morbius movie, so I think we'll get some more context for this mutation with Mulligan after that movie comes out early next year. It's coming out in January, so we won't have to wait that long. Also with Toxin, the whole post-credit scene telenovela moment implies that Venom could get pregnant again, and we could see a version of Toxin in the future. As Venom takes off to avoid being arrested, they have a conversation about Sancho Panza and Don Quixote, using their relationship in the Don Quixote story as a metaphor for Eddie Brock and Venom's relationship, saying that they're good together, even though it's a really crazy relationship. Also paying off Venom's one wish from earlier in the movie to feel sand between its toes and wind in its hair, even though the symbiotes don't have hair. They kind of make a joke about that. Eddie takes him to a beach, and the beach is meant to be the same location where their hotel room is in the post-credit scene. I've already done a full video for the post-credit scene and all the Easter eggs and references, so I'll link it at the end of this and down in the description. But during that, the symbiote explains that it has 80 billion light years of hive mind knowledge across the multiverse. So the race of the symbiotes, the Clintar, are seemingly connected across the multiverse in a really deep way. Then when the symbiote starts to show him these memories, they're seemingly teleported to the main MCU universe, but the symbiote says, "I didn't do this," and Eddie says, "I had nothing to do with this either." There's this weird glitching effect that looks exactly like the same glitching effect from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse when characters are traveling between universes. Their hotel room changes into a much nicer version of itself with little towels shaped like ducks all around them. And instead of the telenovela on the TV, it's a broadcast of MCU J. Jonah Jameson yelling about Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Then Venom gets up, licks the TV, and says, "That guy," as if it recognizes him. So one of the early theories is the reason why it recognizes that guy is because of the hive knowledge connecting it to the version of the Venom symbiote from Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 3 who fought Peter Parker's Spider-Man in that movie, and that's how he knows who Peter Parker's Spider-Man is. Even though he looks different, he's like, "Oh yeah, that guy." But like I said, based on what's going on in this broadcast with him yelling about Spider-Man in the timeline of the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer, I think most of this post-credit scene happens before they conduct the spell, and them being transported to the other Earth has something to do with what Doctor Strange is doing, blending different realities with the spell to make people forget about Spider-Man in the main MCU universe. This doesn't mean that Venom is going to be a huge character during Spider-Man No Way Home, but I do expect at least some kind of reference to him or a post-credit scene from their side of things just to acknowledge what just happened. The way that Tom Hardy and the Sony people have talked about the Spider-Man Venom crossover movie now, because obviously this is what this is teasing, them crossing over, they made it sound like that movie will be kind of a spin-off, like it won't be Spider-Man 4 and it won't be Venom 3. So I'll do more Spider-Man Venom crossover videos in the next week or so talking about that. If you spotted any really huge Easter eggs during the movie that I didn't talk about during the video, just write them below in the comments. My full What If Episode 9 finale video will post next Wednesday just like normal, and then I'll be doing episodes for the Hawkeye series, and I'll be doing more Spider-Man No Way Home videos soon too. We'll get another trailer pretty soon. Everyone click here for my full Venom Let There Be Carnage post-credit scene video, and click here for my Marvel What If Episode 9 finale trailer video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.